November 2021. But who's in charge? In a few months, the Bitcoin protocol will change to implement several modifications. This is an event in the ecosystem.
We have lock-in.
Lock-in secure.
Changes in Bitcoin have been getting rarer and rarer since 2009, and that's just as well. When you decide to put some of your savings into crypto, it seems better than having it change every week by a handful of impatient developers. Now, we often hear that Bitcoin is decentralized, acephalous, without governance, and that no one has control over the protocol or the network. So in that case, who decides to change the code? What are the goals of the people who decide on the evolution of Bitcoin? Who, for example, approved the implementation of Taproot? Quite a question. All this sounds like an anarchic process. By definition, anarchy is a society based on direct democracy without a vertical power system. Well, the way Bitcoin works is exactly that. For the moment at least, it is a small miracle in itself, because attempts to organize power in a decentralized way in a group is a bit of a holy grail for human organizations. The basic question is the organization of consensus. The fundamental role of a centralized authority that works well is to beat the heads of those who do not respect the established rule so that the cohesion of the group holds. Tell yourself that the 51% majority rule consists in leaving out a maximum of 49% of the population. There must be something better. So, why does Bitcoin work where so many attempts in the past have failed? What a question. Come on. Let's go. As you know, Bitcoin is based on a number of rules and instructions. For example, there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoins. Miners are rewarded for their work with a certain exact number of Bitcoins. A transaction output cannot be spent twice, etc., etc. All these rules are written into the computer code. These rules are the fundamentals on which Bitcoin is based. To be part of the network, you must use these rules, and only these rules. This is called the consensus rules. Now, Bitcoin protocol is open source. That is, it is open and available to everyone. Unlike the Google search engine, for example, or the Amazon algorithm, anyone can download the Bitcoin code, analyze it, and propose changes. A change in the Bitcoin protocol hadn't happened since the SegWit project in 2017. At the time, developers were trying to solve the problem of block size and network congestion. The SegWit update also solved some old bugs and created a solid foundation for possible future changes to the protocol. Indeed, Bitcoin developers already had a number of possible improvements in mind, including Taproot, which will finally be implemented this November after years of discussion and work. Without going into detail, Taproot aims to improve the efficiency and flexibility of Bitcoin and also aims to improve the privacy of transactions made on the network. Taproot will also allow the deployment of certain smart contracts and will be very useful for the operation of the Lightning Network, a famous secondary layer that will allow Bitcoin to perform millions of microtransactions per second. In short, Taproot is a very positive update for Bitcoin, and the whole community seems to agree on that. The Taproot packages includes, for example, BIP 340, BIP 341, and BIP 342 for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. But we come back to our original question. Who validates these proposals? Who authorized the SegWit and now Taproot update? And this is where it gets interesting. Bitcoin relies on an extremely powerful self-defense system based on the economic interests of all its users. And by that I mean individuals and merchants, but also miners, exchange platforms, developers, and all the companies in the sector. That's a lot of people. In order for a protocol change to be adopted, it must pass through a series of steps, including verification and testing, and finally reach a consensus within the community, i.e., be accepted by a majority, or ideally, by all network participants. If the change proposal fails to meet any of the above criteria, it is rejected, or at least should be rejected in theory. If you decide to make a change anyway, it's no longer Bitcoin. And that's how Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Unlimited, Bitcoin Gold, etc. came about. All of these cryptocurrencies share their roots with Bitcoin, but at some point they split up because of changes in their code that were not approved by the community. This is called a hard fork. In terms of individual responsibility, each participant is free to follow the rules of the Bitcoin protocol or not. However, if you decide not to follow them, then you must go your own way. In the real world, this doesn't make sense because it's like making a copy of the system and giving it a new existence. For example, in the case of the election of Joe Biden against Donald Trump, the political divide was very strong. If the USA was a blockchain, then Trump supporters would have made a copy and paste of the USA and chosen to put Trump as their president of this new alternative country. From then on, every citizen would live in the country of their choice, which would write its own history. That is a fork. In the physical world, this makes no sense, but in the world of information and blockchain, it is very simple to do. You copy and paste Bitcoin and try to convince as many people as possible to use this new version. As a result, all participants in the Bitcoin network are individually free and responsible for their choices they make. Each participant assumes responsibility. At the same time, on the other hand, for a currency network like Bitcoin, it is extremely important to stay united. A currency is only useful if it is shared among a large number of people. Bitcoin fits perfectly into Metcalfe's law. Its utility grows exponentially with the number of users. Being alone on a new Bitcoin Biz network is not necessarily a good idea, but it is possible. It's a choice. Bitcoin is not coercive. It relies on the voluntary participation and free cooperation of individuals. If you don't like that and Bitcoin is not to your liking, just leave the network. It's not much more complicated than that. FYI, in 2017, a small number of very powerful and influential people in the ecosystem proposed a protocol change called SegWit2x. I won't go into details, but the debate raged within the Bitcoin community. A civil war broke out. On one side, the big companies in the sector and the miners, and on the other side, the developers and the users. This was a key moment in Bitcoin's history. Would a minority of important players be able to force a change in the protocol? The answer was no. Because of the lack of consensus and the risks involved, SegWit2x was abandoned. In effect, the risk was really high that the community would crack and that everyone would lose in the end. This passage from Bitcoin's history shows that an anarchic system can only function under the following two conditions. The group must pursue a common goal that brings it together. The consent of almost everyone is a necessary condition for the strength of the group. This double objective brings us to the question of speculation, which is an indispensable element. Speculare in Latin means to think, to reflect. To speculate is to project oneself into the future, and this raises the question of meaning, purpose, objective. For Bitcoin, each participant must ask himself whether he has more to gain than lose by remaining in the network. One of the worst-case scenarios for a decentralized blockchain like Bitcoin is that it splits up and no one really knows which version is the right one to follow and which version to call Bitcoin. This is a topic for debate, and there are several theories to provide an answer. Some claim that the Bitcoin blockchain is the blockchain with the most energy invested in it. That would mean that Bitcoin is the network with the most hashing power. If this were the case, it would put a particularly large amount of power in the hands of miners. On the other hand, there are those who say that the users decide. By installing a specific version of the protocol on their computer, merchants and individuals impose the consensus rules on the miners and decide which blockchain is valid and which is not. And then there are some who argue that the only true indicator is the price of the token on the exchange platforms. Bitcoin would then be the blockchain with the highest valuation. In the end, it seems that everyone is more or less right. There is no right answer to the question, what is the real Bitcoin? Everyone decides in a totally subjective way which protocol and blockchain they consider to be the legitimate Bitcoin, while keeping an eye on what the others are doing. And strangely enough, it works out pretty well. At least until now. One might have expected chaos, but no. Satoshi's invention is an incredible example of spontaneous order, emerging spontaneously as a result of the behaviors of all the people in the community, and all without being imposed by external factors. The economic motivations of each person drives the whole to be reasonable. A very good photo that illustrates the governance mechanism of Bitcoin. Each character represents a group in the ecosystem: miners, users, developers, exchange platforms, etc. Bitcoin is a tank progressing unstoppably since 2009. Its inertia is not a bug, but a strength. The community supporting and working on Bitcoin has taken an ultra-conservative approach. All decisions related to code changes are evaluated with extreme caution and involve all stakeholders in the ecosystem. The Bitcoin community is anarchistic, conservative, liberal, and highly speculative. Interesting, no? In the case of the Taproot update, the developers and users of the network were clearly for it from the start. One could see on the forums and social networks, especially Twitter, a real adhesion to the project from almost the entire community of Bitcoiners. It remained to be seen whether the miners, who had a little less interest in seeing this happen, would also support the initiative. From May 1st to June 12, 2021, miners around the world had the opportunity to express their position in the issue by inserting a message in the blocks they generated. Everyone closely followed the evolution of the situation on the site taproot.watch. A green square represented a block where the miner was in favor for the update. A red square represented a block where the miner was opposed. The goal was to collect the support of at least 90% of the miners to go forward. Although the beginning was a bit difficult, the target was finally reached on June 12th. So, the Taproot update is going to happen, and that's great news for Bitcoin. Like wine, Bitcoin is getting better with time. The fundamentals of the network are improving as it goes along. That's it for this video. Feel free to share your views in the comments.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like my videos, please subscribe and don't forget to hit the bell if you want to be notified of the next episode. And if you want to invest in the stock market over the long term or diversify your financial portfolio, I'm offering you an analysis of the 8 European star stocks to have. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.